I want to watch some videos today. We're going to watch 2 videos. The videos are pretty interesting because we are tethering the line of a very fine demonic line that's entering our world. Like, we are literally living in a godless society. And despite your political viewpoint, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you need to learn and understand how to identify wrong for being wrong. That's what it comes down to. This has nothing to do with the donkey or the elephant. It has everything to do with identifying wrong for being wrong. Let me show you the first video and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Let's watch.
Virginity. What is it? And what's the big deal about losing it? Let me cut to the chase. Virginity is a completely made-up concept. It's a term that was created simply to control and shame people, mainly women.
Well, first of all, I'm gonna get back to the video. I'm sorry. I gotta stop though. But first of all, is virginity really a made-up concept? Like, is it really a made-up concept? Like, if you're like me, now I am a Bible-believing Christian. That's who I am. And if I believe everything in the Bible is true, then you can go and look into scriptures and you can see things about being a virgin. You could also see things about why it's not good to engage in premarital sex and the whole 9 yards. And so, is virginity really a made-up concept? Or better yet, this, let me ask you this. If I went and talked to your young child right now about losing their virginity, how would you feel if I did that to your child? If you're anything like me, I'd probably try to rip your head off. I'd probably try to take your life. Again, don't lock me up. This is just me talking right now. I'm not really gonna try to take your life. But if you try to talk to my kids, especially my daughter, and you try to talk to my daughter about virginity not even being a thing, of virginity being in this made up concept, we're gonna have some issues. So I want you to look at this from a lens of a parent having kids and figuring out and understanding, is this a right or a wrong belief system? Let's continue to watch.
A virgin is someone who's never had sex, but it's not as simple as it seems. For one thing, medically, virginity isn't a real thing. Another reason the idea of virginity is complete nonsense is that sex means different things to different people. Generally speaking, society tends to define sex in a very narrow way: penetration, penis into vagina. But where does that definition leave queer people? Or folks who can't or don't have penis and vagina sex and choose to have oral, anal, or another type of sex instead? There is also a double standard on who carries the burden of virginity. Society puts pressure on men for not having sex at the exact same time they shame women for having it. Make it make sense. It's time to throw away the notion of losing your virginity. Because the truth is, when we make our own decision to become sexually active, we aren't setting ourselves up to lose anything at all. We hope we are gaining things like intimacy, self-insight, pleasure, and empowerment. Sex is defined by one thing and one thing only: you.
That is demonic, people. I don't care how you try to spin it, but that is demonic on every level. Sex is a very, number one, it's a very intimate thing that should only be reserved for you and your spouse, your married partner. That's just my personal belief. That's what it is. And anything outside of that is wrong. I mean, it just is what it is. But yet we live in a society now where I want to conform, or I need to embrace your idea about sex, and so, or being a virgin. And so I'm going to welcome what you have to say, and we're going to now create this new reality for people, which again is wrong. Why is it wrong? Well, let's think about it this way. If we start going with this frame of mind, what happens to the person who's had sex over 20 times, but they say, well, I identify as a virgin? Does that really make them a virgin? Like, really think about it. Does that make them a virgin because they identify with being a virgin, even though they've had sexual penetration or whatever it is over 20 times? So where does that fine line stop? We have to protect the kids. Like, this is what it comes down to, is it comes down to the babies. It comes down to the precious babies that we are bringing into this world and the way we are raising them. Like, it's not even just like, let's take the religious part out of it. Let's just remove the religious part out of it. Sex is a very powerful thing. As a law enforcement officer for over 10 years, there was 3 commonalities that really contributed to a lot of the crime. It was either substance abuse, so alcohol or drugs, money Money was the other big one. So, somebody gets ripped off or whatever. And so there's crimes that are committed because of because of money. And number 3, ultimately, is sex. Affairs, all these different things. People commit crimes of passion because of sex. And so if we're talking about the idea of sex, it's such a very, very intimate thing that we need to remain and we need to keep it sacred. But by watching videos like this, you're basically lowering the level of sacredness of sex between two people, and you're making way for everybody to just say, oh, I'm going to define what sex is. And ultimately, who gets hurt at the very end of this is the person who's been sexually assaulted, or the person that didn't want to have sex, or the person that feels guilty because they said yes to somebody that they should have said no to. Those are the people that ultimately get hurt. So we have to protect our kids. We have to protect our kids. Now, I'm not saying that as adults or as human beings, quite frankly, I'm not saying that we're going to be perfect. Like, Lord knows, I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. So I'm not trying to sit here and say that every single one of you has to be perfect. But what I am trying to say is that we should strive. We should strive towards perfection. We should strive towards living a life where I teach and train my kids that, look, you find that person that you want to be married to. And when you find that person that you want to be married to, that is the person that you give your virginity up to, because it's reserved. It's for that person and that person alone. It was created, it was designed that way. But when you do things backwards, when you do things out of order, there are problems that come with that. There's so many problems that come with that. I was a guy that again, I told you I'm not perfect, and there's a lot of things that I'm not proud of doing. But as I got older, I started to see why certain things in the Bible were in there. It wasn't because God was trying to say, oh, you guys don't deserve to have this fun. Because I think the way society looks at it is like, oh, you know what? Go out there and do these things because you can have fun. Like, if you go out there and use drugs, it's fun. If you go out there and sleep with all these different people, it's fun. So I think we promote that in society. But the reason, if you look in Bible, the reason why there's things that we shouldn't be doing is because there are greater consequences that come to these things that we perceive as being fun. So for example, let's just say I go out there and have sex before marriage. It's not that big of a deal, right? I do my thing. So then later on, I end up getting married. Well, now, can I fully give myself over to somebody who has already, that has wants me intimately, emotionally, and passionately, but I've already given myself away to all these other people? Can I really truly do that? Or what about the girl who's been sexually assaulted by the person that just thinks it's okay to just do whatever I want to do with whoever? There are so many consequences to sin. There's so many consequences to the actions that we have, drinking and drug use and all these other things. And so when we see narratives like this being pushed, we need to wake up. We need to wake up. Again, I say there's the left, there's the right, then there's me. What that means is basically saying look, let's get beyond the politics and let's just talk about morality for what morality is. Let's talk about good and evil for what good and evil really is. Let's get away from all the things and saying, I'm going to identify with this. I'm going to push this message because, this is a message that my political party is pushing. And let's just start with what is right and what is wrong. Can we do that? What's the difficulty in doing that? So you think this is bad enough? I want to watch another video because, again, the slippery slope continues. I want to watch this other video and I want to know how you feel as a parent. What is your thoughts as a parent when you watch this next video that I'm going to play? Let's watch.
So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole community.
Okay, pump the brakes. Pump the brakes. First of all, what do you mean recognize the fact that kids don't belong to parents? Last I checked, they were my kids. They're my responsibility. I got to freaking put, food on the table. I got to, pay for all the freaking sports and this and that. Last I checked, the government looks at me as is my responsibility to raise my kid, even though a lot of people don't take that responsibly as they should. But it's my responsibility as a parent, right? So number one is I have the mindset that I want to be a good parent. So I'm going to provide for my kids. But if we start pushing narratives like this, where kids belong to a community, then what happens next? Really think about this. You're the parent, or you're the future parent. If we start saying, or we start adopting this idea that kids belong to the community, then are we going to allow the community to make decisions on behalf of your child? If we allow this narrative, then essentially what we start doing is we start opening up the door to allow the government to come into your home and take your child away because you don't believe a certain way. We open the door to allowing the government to come into your house and telling you that you have to put this medicine in your kid because we think it's best for your kid. We open up the door to saying that, you know what, we think that your kid should be learning this. And so he's going to learn that regardless of what you say. You see, one of the things that makes America so amazing is the simple fact that we live in a society that allows us to have freedoms that allow us to run and govern our own homes. I mean, it's a beauty. I mean, think about it. I'm a Christian. And so, that's what my morality is in my home. That's where my mind is at. But the great thing about our country is that our country allows, if you are a Muslim or if you're, say you're an atheist, you're a Mormon, whatever it may be, it allows you to raise your child the way you want to raise them without having any other interference. And so when we start tethering this line of saying, no, your child is the community or property of the community, then you're basically stripping away all of our rights to raise the kids how we want to raise them. Now, keep in mind, there are some parents that shouldn't be parents, and there's some people and some parents that aren't raising the kids the appropriate way. And so I do think that there is a level of, where you have to have somebody from a government entity to come in and step into the household in order to put that child in the best position possible for them to thrive. So I'm not discounting, CPS or anything like that. But what I am saying is that the idea that we should start taking rights away from parents, which we are seeing, is wrong. You don't believe me? I mean, it's happening right now. Like, one of the issues I have with, I guess, education right now is that I think education is teaching things that should be reserved to be taught in the home, whether it be religious, whether it be sex, like we just talked about. Like, there's certain things that should be reserved to be taught in the home or to be reserved to taught to somebody else who has, legal authority in a child's life. Is not the job of a school. What happened to the days where we went to school and I learned about math? 2 + 2 = 4. The days where I learned about history or English and it was just that. What happened to those days? But now we've made everything so political and there's an agenda behind it. Well, what's the agenda? If you ask me, it's a spiritual agenda. I mean, there's a spiritual agenda at play right now, whether you realize it or not. And, I was having this conversation the other day with somebody. Somebody asked me, like, why do you even believe in God? Which I think it's a fair, honest question. It's a fair, honest question. Number one, I think that you have to have more faith to believe that God doesn't exist than you have to have in faith to believe that God does exist, because you're really hoping that if God doesn't exist, you are praying, you're laying all your faith to hope that he doesn't exist, because if you die, then nothing happens. My faith that if God does exist, and the reason I don't really see it as having as much faith as an atheist is simply because if you look around, if you look at the birds of the air, the mountains in the air, the sky, the way the human anatomy works, the things, everything work, I think it's so easy to see the existence of a God or a higher power than to believe that God doesn't exist. But beyond just the physical existence, why does Ryan Tillman believe in God? I was raised Catholic in a Catholic home, so I always had that foundation that there is God in your life, no doubt about it. As I got older, I, became a born again Christian, which if you, compare Catholicism to Christianity, they both believe in Jesus Christ. They both believe Jesus was died on the cross for our sins and stuff like that. So there's a lot of it is just more of a legalistic way of looking at things versus a relationship. But all in all, why does Ryan Tillman believe in God? When I lost my dad 2 years ago, and when I lost my father-in-law 2.5 years ago, one of the only things that gave me hope about losing them was a hope that I was going to see them again one day. That's the only hope. Because think about it. Let's say I didn't believe in God and my mom or my dad's passed away, and after this earth, in my mind is like, so what? This was all for nothing? I lived this life. They lived this life all for nothing. I had these great relationships with them. I had a relationship with my dad and loved them and all this, and it was all for nothing. Where's the hope in that? What type of hope do you walk around this life with if you know that it all stops once you die? So for me, when I read the Bible, when I read the Bible and I learn about who Jesus Christ is and how I learn how he's the way, the truth, and the life, and when I learn that, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, that gives me hope that I'm going to see my loved ones one day. That means that, as long as my family believes in Christ and who he is and what he did, and as long as I do, then we will be reunited with him one day. So that's why I believe in God. That's why I have hope in my life, because I know that this life, I have two lives to live. I have the life here on this earth, but then I also have the life that once I take my final breath, I'm going to be in the presence of our Lord, as well as some of my loved ones. But if you don't have that hope, then what's life worth living? You know, people say, you know, they used to say a long time ago, YOLO, you only live once. But that ain't true. That ain't true. You will live twice. It just depends on where you're going to live. And so I bring the conversation up of God into this because right now we are, if you believe in Christ and if you believe in God, who is one and the same, then that also means that you also have to believe in the devil. And if there is a devil and the devil is against God, then what would the devil want to do? The devil wants to get all these other people and send them to eternal damnation, because that's where he's going. So if that's his job, and his job is to deter people away from God and deter people away from living their life for God, then he's going to start putting out agendas like this in order to detract away from not only you, but your children. My friends, your children are under attack, whether you realize it or not. This whole world is under attack. And, you know, again, I've come out and said, like, I'm done basically trying to, like, you know, be politically correct in many ways, because truth is truth. That's what it comes down to. The great thing about our country, the great thing about the United States of America, is it gives us our freedoms to believe in who we want to believe and in what we want to believe. But when we see messages like this, when we see agendas like this, it's an attack on the very freedom that every single one of us get to experience every single day. Are you willing to have your freedom compromised because of social agendas that are being pushed? Again, this isn't about being left. This isn't about being right. This is about me being me and looking at what's right and what's wrong for what it is. And it pains me to see so many of these agendas attacking our children. So many of these things that are trying to tell you that you're wrong. So I guess what it comes down to at the end of the day is like, you know, how do we have conversations with one another and not counsel each other? How do we learn to agree to disagree? Is it possible? Like, is it possible to learn to agree to disagree? I think it very much is possible. I do it all the time. There's a lot of people in my life that I have great relationships with that do not believe or subscribe to the same belief system or structure that I have. But that doesn't make me like them any less. That doesn't make me, you know, say, no, I can't get down like that. I'm gonna leave you guys with one last story, and then I'm gonna let y'all get back to your day. Yesterday, I was leaving church. And as I was leaving church, a guy came up to me who's been going to the church for quite some time. We don't have a crazy relationship. I see him. We've talked to each other before, but it was nothing like amazing. So he ends up buying my book, unbeknownst to me. I didn't realize he bought my book. And if you haven't bought my book, make sure you guys buy it. It's called Happy Eyes. Get it on Amazon. Get it wherever you guys buy books at. But he bought my book. So he didn't just buy my book, my friends, but he actually read the book, which that's like a accomplishment for most of y'all that buy books and got all these shit books sitting on your shelves that you've never read or you start to read. But anyways, I digress. He reads my book, but before he starts opening up and talking to me, he starts breaking down like in tears. Like he's kind of crying a little bit. Like he's like, hold on one second, hold on. And so I'm waiting, and he's like, Brian, I have to tell you, man. He said, I read your book, and it's probably one of the best books I've ever read. But he said, but more than that, like your book brought new perspective to me when it comes to relationships and to how to have relationships with people that you may not get along with or you may not like. And he goes on to tell me that him and his sister-in-law have had a very, very strained relationship since he's been married to his wife. And they would see each other at parties or functions, and they wouldn't talk to each other. Like they are very different from each other. And so they just had no relationship. He said, after reading my book, it brought a new perspective. And one of the things that rung true in the book for him was what my dad told me when I was younger, which was treat everybody like they're your mom, your dad, your brother, your cousin, despite what they may believe, despite what they think. And the whole philosophy in the book is if you can learn to do that, you will learn to be able to have relationships with anybody and everybody, despite who they are. It doesn't mean you have to conform. It doesn't mean you have to believe what they believe, but you can still have good, positive relationships with them. So then he goes on to say, so he took a lot of the advice that he read from the book. And the last time he saw his sister-in-law, he actually sat down and had a conversation with her. And he said, man, like, I can't tell you how much it transformed my relationship with her and how it's transformed me as a person, because I realized that even though I have my own belief system, my own set of way of thinking, it doesn't mean that I can't have relationships with others who don't think like I do. And what was even more evident about that was when he told me about the end of the book. And he said, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't a fan of the end of the book. Now, the reason he wasn't a fan of the end of the book is because there was a part of that book where it talks about some of the actions that I did as a police officer and why I did it. And from the outside looking in, one might say, oh, you compromised or you caved to the political pressure, the social pressure, and so you caved. But when I gave him the perspective that I'm about to share with you, you'll understand why I did what I did. And in order for you guys to know what that story is, you got to buy the book. But what I ended up telling him was this. I said, look, when this situation happened in law enforcement, sometimes as Christians, sometimes as believers in Christ, you have to do things that you don't want to do. At being married to my wife, there's arguments that I know, no doubt about it, that I've won. Some of y'all may not believe that because you know how the women win most of the arguments. But every now and again, a dog catches a bone and us men will win arguments. Well, in those times where I've won some of my arguments, and I know without a doubt I am right, God will stop me in my tracks and God will say, I don't care if you're right. I care about you making it right. And when I looked at it from that perspective, it caused me to do things that I didn't want to do, that forced me to get out of my comfort zone. So looking at that situation as a police officer, when this whole thing arose, is I had to do things that I didn't want to do because it was the right thing to do, even though it wasn't necessarily the right thing, if that makes any sense. And so when I broke it down to him like that, it was almost like this light bulb went off and he's like, hearing it from that perspective, it absolutely makes sense. My friends, sometimes we get so caught up in chasing, oh, this is right, and I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to beat it in your head that it's right, it's right, it's right. When if you just learn to have relationships with people, you get more bees with honey. And over time, you might win a person over to truth, not because you told them the truth, but because you displayed the truth in your actions. And that's what this comes down to today. You know, so as you guys watch these videos, as you guys see these things, again, like I said, my new thing right now, if you guys keep hearing me say this, there's the left, there's the right, and then there's me. It's because, again, I'm trying to get beyond the political division that our whole world lives in right now. We're going into election season. And I just want to be able to have conversations and tell you how Ryan Tillman feels, whether you agree with me or not. And if you can still walk away from this podcast saying, I don't agree with everything he's saying, but I like that guy, Ryan, then hey, I'm doing my job. If you express people love and empathy and respect and all those different things, just watch what happens to the relationships in your guys' life. So I appreciate you guys. I hope you guys have been enjoying the Ryan Tillman Show. We got some other great guests coming on. If you guys are like not liking the political pressures that are going on or the public safety or the issues or the lack thereof in the community, I'm actually working on a guest right now who's getting ready to run for office. That is, you know, we're talking about district attorneys here. Those are the ones that prosecute these people. So I'm going to probably have him on. I'm going to have some more amazing guests that's going to deliver great quality content to you guys. So make sure you guys keep following. Do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you guys truly believe in Ryan, please do me that favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, because it helps my message expand. I want to expand my message to all the nations across everywhere. And do me a favor, last but not least, if you're interested in this apparel, boom, y'all see it? Y'all see the hat? Go to breakingbarriersunited.com, go visit our apparel, go check out all the things that we're doing. We've got some great things coming your way. And yes, for those of you guys wondering, Switched will be coming back. We are in the process of doing that, so stay tuned. But with that being said, I love you guys, I appreciate you guys, and God bless.